Welcome to the first episode of Say More. In this episode, I talk with my friend David Gandelman, a spiritual teacher, author, and someone I met over 15 years ago when we were both in our search for meaning. Since then, he's gone on to teach millions of people through meditation and somehow manages to make the whole spiritual path feel grounded, honest, and even funny. In this conversation, we talk about why reality is hard and why trying to avoid it usually makes it harder. We explore discomfort, spiritual bypassing, and how meditation isn't about escaping life. It's about learning how to stay with it. If you've ever asked yourself, is this healing or just chaos? This one's for you. All right, David Gandelman is here. Welcome to the pod. Say more.
It is great to see you again. It's been a while.
It has, yes. So David and I know each other from Hawaii, actually. I was on a family vacation. David resided in Hawaii. Is that right?
Yeah, on the Big Island.
There. How long were you there for?
7 years.
Studying at the school, learning intuition, right?
Yeah, kind of the mystical arts, let's say, meditation, healing, intuitive development, all the really woo-woo spiritual stuff.
Love it.
Yeah.
We wanted to gather here today. David is a very talented and has an extensive amount of experience teaching meditation and these types of intuitive skills for people to apply to their daily lives. So that is a great crossover with mental health and what I do as a therapist. So we are just happy to have you here. And you're in Boulder right now.
Yeah, I am. And we crossed paths here when I moved to Boulder, and then you left me and moved over to California.
I left you, okay.
You left me.
You also helped me find my puppy a beautiful family home that I was heartbroken about, but was so glad that the puppy found a good home.
I remember that, yeah, during COVID.
You're also a very good animal soul caretaker person. I don't know what you call it.
Am the neighborhood dog caretaker because I travel a lot. I can't have my own, so I'm constantly dog sitting. I do some rescues when I can, which always breaks my heart giving them away. I have a cat. I'm a little animal obsessed. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
What do you think are you connected intuitively, do you think, to these animals?
Yeah, there's an innocence. They're always present with you. They always humble you. They don't give a crap who you are or what you've done or what you haven't done. And I just love the cuddling and the cuteness. There's this saying Eckhart Tolle always says, I wish I was the person my dog thinks I am. I do kind of love that. You just get hit with love from dogs, from cats, more disdain and contempt. I know you have a cat named Michelle Obama, and she's adorable.
I do. We added 2 others as well, Pablo Picasso and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who goes by Rue.
A house full of legends.
Yes. The big topic that we kind of came together and wanted to address today was kind of inspired by you're working on a new book, and the theme of it, I think, kind of like working title or theme is accepting hard things and how to live in this world with our daily problems, daily suffering, and work with how to live with that, accept that, and then also have joy and these other positive experiences that make life worth living. So would you care to share, where did that idea come from to write a book on?
Well, it's really just the theme of my lifetime of work and working with clients and students. And I've just seen it 1,000 times over, and also have experienced it personally, where life just keeps hitting us with the next thing. And every time it does, we get hit with a wave. We're like, man, why this? Why that? I don't like it. I want something different. There's always some form of resistance, maneuvering, manipulating, bargaining, denial, avoidance. And a lot of our energy, life force is spent negotiating, fighting, avoiding life. And as meditators, all of my students are meditators or learning. We have to learn how to lean in and be present and learn how to accept reality as it is. I think the only way to move forward in life is to accept reality as it is. Mm-hmm. And that could be hard at first. And so the book really came out of that. And it came out of an experience I had in college. It was Eastern Religions 101 class. We had a guest professor. I'll never forget, Dr. Spellmeyer. I think he ran the English department, but he was a Zen teacher, and he came to talk, and it was a big classroom, like maybe 200 or 300 people in the lecture hall, and it was old school, early 2000s. Green chalkboard. He just drew a huge horizontal line on the chalkboard. And on one side, he wrote enlightenment, and on the other side, he wrote suicide. And then he put a check mark in the middle. And he said, most of us reside somewhere in the middle, but we swing from not wanting to be here, which the extreme would be suicide, to fully accepting being here in this moment, which we could call enlightenment. And so we oscillate as human beings, most of us. Rarely do you find somebody that's totally present and accepting all the time. And also rarely do you find someone that's in complete resistance every second of life, although that does happen. And so that really resonated with me, the simplicity of that. And then I went to one of his meditations. I sat, and it was beautiful and blissful, 45-minute Zen meditation. And then I went again at the end of the semester, and it was painful. And I was thinking a lot, and my back hurt, and I was just frustrated. And I went to him after, and I was like, that was hard. And he's like, well, are you in finals right now? Are you stressed about it? And even though I thought I was so conscious, I was like, no, I'm not. Oh yeah, I am stressed about finals. You're right. And it was manifesting in my meditation, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I wasn't even conscious of it. So that was a moment where I had a bit of an awakening to, there's a lot more going on here that I'm conscious of that I need to learn how to deal with. And I mean, finals is one thing, but when, things get really hard, breakups, people pass away, cancers, financial issues, instability, world instability, all of those things, when those waves hit the shores and we don't have the tools to deal with them, that's when we really get in trouble. And we end up over-medicating or substance abuse or avoiding or, whatever it is that we do to cope. So I know you're a big coper, gambling, alcohol, all the things.
You've revealed all my secrets. No, I mean, that's a really poignant story of like moving from kind of like daily, like default mode awareness to being present after having sat with something. And then also having like someone else, like a teacher, kind of point out and maybe is able to help us see certain things that we're not really fully conscious of that are impacting our level of suffering and struggle. So I'm just curious, was that like one of the first points on your path that you had that like even moment of awakening? Or
my first one was when I was 16. I started reading and meditating. So I had been already meditating for a couple of years by the time I got to college, but I didn't have any teachers. I didn't have any tools. It was all just through books and my own experience. And so I hadn't, been hit with anything super difficult yet in life to test that awareness. And that was one of them. That was the beginning of being in college, away from home, the stress of having to pass exams and make sure my parents' money was being well spent. So that was all new to me. And then I thought that was a big wave. Looking back, that was a little wave.
big at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's a very critical point, I think, in a lot of people's sort of development, and like lots of things can happen at that age, like different crises. And I think that is, depending on your history, one of the biggest first points of major suffering and kind of existential, like, who am I?
Yeah. It was for me.
Yeah. Same. I started out at a big university, thought I was going into aerospace engineering, got into an engineering school, and then something happened and they had too many people in the program, so I got pushed into the undeclared major. And it gave me an opportunity to start exploring different things. And I had kind of similarly an earlier interest in spirituality as a teenager. I had a pole vaulting accident, and that stopped me from doing sports. And I was a pole vaulter, and I, had potential to go get a scholarship, and that was sort of a path. And then that all fell apart. And I think I was just drawn towards like, healing or awakening, I guess. One of the first kind of awakening experiences I had was visiting a naturopath, and they did this like energy testing, like muscle testing,
Hmm.
and my adrenals were off. It was like all of these like very subtle kind of like nervous system energy systems were off. And she did like meridian stuff, and I felt a shift. And I also found yoga at that time. So I would do my like pranayama before school. And I don't know if we're getting off track here, but
Where did you grow up?
I was in Camarillo and Thousand Oaks, California.
Oh, cool. Right. So that's outside of Los Angeles?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But no real, I mean, my parents were not interested in Eastern anything, so I just kind of found it on my own. And then after I went to that big university, I kind of became disillusioned with just like, what am I doing here? And like these large existential questions that I think can happen in that transition for a lot of young people. This like deep search for meaning, and then I went to the Hoffman process, and then I was like, this is like the most meaningful thing that I want to pursue in my life, spirituality. And then I found Naropa, and that was like a home to me. Yeah.
And for those who don't know, it's a university in Boulder that primarily focuses on training therapists. Not only, but there's a writing program, but it's very much for people who are interested in therapy, spirituality, Buddhism.
Yeah. Where did you find like your first sense of like home in terms of like a spiritual home?
Probably the first one, I guess, was when I went to India and I lived in some ashrams there and found my people. We made some really good friends, and we would spend a lot of time meditating, going to see gurus, reading, talking about the books we were reading. It was a lot of sitting around coffee shops pontificating on enlightenment and existence. And at that time in my early 20s, post college, it was perfect. I was free. I didn't have to worry about money because India was so cheap. I think I was spending $2 a night on my room, and then the meals were like $1 or $2. And so I didn't have that pressure to go get a job. I could ride that wave a little bit and study and do yoga and learn and meet people. And that was really formative for me. So that was the first time I kind of found my tribe of people that were similar.
Yeah. So you've been a deep seeker, deep spiritual
Deep
seeker.
Seek. I think that's a Chinese AI now. Yeah. But yes, from 16, I would say, even when I was 13, I started trading stocks and reading the news. I think I was looking for something, wanting to know the deeper meaning behind everything, even at that age. So it was with me for quite a while. I even remember walking home from school, elementary school, so maybe I was 8, 9, 10. I don't remember exactly, but thinking, what is it like when I don't think, or what would it be like if I didn't exist? And just starting to explore what my consciousness was at a pretty young age.
Yeah. I've often wondered like what that is, like to have those questions at such a young age. Like I also kind of remember like 5 years old being like, who am I? Like,
Mm,
and it kind of just like bleeding into just like space kind of, which sounds trippy, but
yeah. I think that's the universe starting to become conscious of itself through whatever form it's taking, including us.
yeah, this is like a spiritual topic for sure.
Hmm.
In the realm maybe of transpersonal psychology and just thinking about human development and psychology from a different lens that acknowledges or goes beyond kind of like the ego. And so I think that there's such a good interaction or intersection between psychology and ego development to a healthy ego, because we live and we exist in this world, and then there's kind of the beyond that. So I'm
Yeah.
curious actually how you view that and how you kind of teach those principles of being in the world and also like a spiritual being or
Yeah. Well, I don't teach it to everyone. It depends on someone's interest. And so I don't force where I am or my view. I try not to on anybody. I'm much more interested in just helping people with tools to be able to be more present and live whatever life they're looking to live more
yeah.
deeply. If someone's interested in spirituality or the existential questions, then yeah, I love getting in the deep end of the pool. But I really don't like when someone's like, I've had this realization and you need to have it too. I mean, that's where every religion, cult, and group that freaks me out starts.
Yeah.
And it's always some person who's had some kind of awakening, and then their ego takes over that awakening, and they need everyone to be like them or see the world like them. So I'm just prefacing all of it with that. So if you have your own inclination towards finding truth with a capital T or self with a capital S, and you really want to know what existence is and step into that mystery, then I think meditation is one of the ways that we open that door, where we sit still and we reflect on what our own consciousness is. And then it's like a kind of waking up out of the mental dream. So most human beings, I mean, just go outside your house, walk to any store or anywhere, you look around and you'll just see a bunch of bipedal, slightly evolved apes walking around, just lost in the screen of their mind. Just every thought they have, just following it, losing themselves, having an emotional reaction. You see, how does that person see me? How does that person perceive me? Do I have enough resources? And just at a very base level, semi-conscious or unconscious. So that's the vast majority of where humanity, I think, functions at the moment. And we'll all have moments of clarity. Even someone really unconscious could have a deep moment of clarity. Maybe something big happens in life, someone passes away. There could be a moment of deep clarity. But for the most part, people walk around pretty unconscious. And so my job as a meditation teacher is to help cultivate awareness in whatever way, shape, or forms. As an example, somebody might have a hard time being in their body. So, and anchoring in this moment in their body. They might lose themselves to thought, fantasy, future, past, pain. And I try to guide them back into this moment. And a lot of that is, as we started the conversation, resistance. It's some form of resistance to the way the world is, the way things are, the way I perceive myself, the way people perceive me. There's a core of resistance to the way the world is. And so I go unconscious to deal with it or avoid it. My job is to help wake them up, which sometimes hurts like a bitch.
Yeah.
I had a student, or no, it was a friend who said, this whole awakening thing sucks.
Yeah.
Hurts.
It does.
It
It
can.
does.
It
Yeah.
can. Yeah.
Once you have a sense of awareness, it's like there's no going back in terms of, I guess there is, like there's different points, but because you can become aware of something, be totally freaked out by it, and go right back into any of the defenses that we have as humans, like denial or repression. And this is actually what I work with, in therapy, in the therapy room, which is like observing. So it's like I'm holding the space and I'm kind of playing witness. I'm also being with, and I'm asking a lot of open-ended questions to get curious about that person's experience. And there's so many layers to why people defend and can't handle the truth or are stuck. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
If you've ever seen The Matrix, there's a character who makes a secret deal with the computer AI matrix, whatever you call it. And he said, I want you to plug me back in and put me back in the dream. I'll give up my friends. He's like the Judas. He preferred to be living in the illusion because it was more fulfilling and less painful to him than being awake in the real world. And I think that would be an example of somebody going back unconscious, because when you become aware, one of the things you become aware of is pain.
Yes.
And it's usually one of the first things, because we're unconscious because we're avoiding pain in some way. And so when you become conscious, you start to realize pain. It might be emotional pain, some form of trauma. It could be existential, like, why am I here? Who am I? I'm going to die soon. There's the contemplation of mortality. And that could be a lot for any human psyche, even a resilient one. And so it is easier in a lot of ways to be unconscious and to let the world entertain us while we eat.
Which I do frequently. I mean, pick your poison or your pleasure, but there's lots of ways to distract. And sometimes that distraction, I think, is necessary to kind of blunt the impact of either trauma or something that's too much, because there's also, people can have breakdowns because of too much of either truth or too much awakening at a certain point. So when that happens, the sort of priority is to help put that person sort of back in their ego, and they're not ready yet. So
Yeah, they're not ready, or they don't have the tools or the support structure.
Yes.
right? So if you're a monk and you're surrounded by 1,000 other monks and you're all doing the same work and you have a breakdown and you've got a great support structure, that's different than if you're living alone in an apartment and you're suicidal and you've got addictions and you've got no support structure. So it really does depend on the context for sure. And
Yes.
so you might need to slowly wean yourself off of stuff versus a huge jump. And then, because if you lose your orientation and your sense of self, that could be worse. You don't want to destroy the ego. You want to wake up out of it. And those are different things. If you have a breakdown and you don't have the tools to realize it could be a breakthrough, you could be in a lot of trouble. And so I agree. I think therapy at a lot of those stages could be extremely helpful.
Spiritual development happening too fast or
Oh,
awakening happening too fast, and then kind of needing to have the right resources and supports if that happens too soon. In therapy and then in my training in transpersonal psychology, there's this concept of spiritual bypassing, and that is a very common term I think these days, but it is sort of well, I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well, but I think for me as a young person, like having had a few pretty big awakenings and spiritual experiences, they threw me into like, what is going on here? Who am I? Like, I just experienced something like truer than what I've known before, and I have no idea how to integrate that. Like, I know something happened. I'm resonating with all of these teachings that like are so foreign, even just to Western, like growing up in Southern California. Like, it was just such a big experience that in transpersonal psychology, I sort of learned about spiritual bypassing, and that like it's a humbling process. It was a humbling process for me to realize, no, shit, I am a 22-year-old. I have nothing figured out. Like, there is a process of slow maturation that happens that needs to happen alongside this development of spirituality, I think. And so really that takes a lot of time, at least in my experience, of integrating those experiences where I'm actually a functioning person in the world and can hold both of those sorts of things, I think. And that actually goes back to our topic of accepting hard things and sort of the paradox of being able to do that, because I think there is a lot of what I found was I have to hold both. I have to hold like the psychological truth of like, wow, I have so much work to do. I am a young person. I need so much more experience. And like, I had this powerful experience that was just like, felt like who I genuinely am to the core without my ego and identity. And so that's being able to hold that paradox just takes a lot of time, and then maturity as well, because there's a lot of resistance to fighting kind of all of the stuff. Why am I not there yet?
yeah. And when it comes to maturity, the brain only develops as fast as it develops, even if you have some kind of awakening. And so, I mean, have you ever met any men?
Say more. You're a man.
Yeah. Our brains just do not, I can only speak for me, but my brain did not fully develop until a very, recent age. And I know a lot of men, they don't hit maturation until, I don't even know, 35, 40, 45. There's stages of it, obviously. But when I was 25, I was like, oh, I got this, because that's all I knew. I didn't know what the road looked like further ahead. I thought I had it. I thought I had it all together. And so if you take immaturity and you match it with some kind of awakening, you can get inflated ego very, very easily. Of, I got this. I'm such a good meditator. Or, for me, I had a degree in philosophy. I know so much. And that's a function of, early 20s consciousness too, especially for young men. I don't know what the female experience is, but we get cocky, and that's a form of protection and a way to move through a world we're probably afraid of and don't really understand yet. And then after some time of getting your ass kicked by life, people die, you get dumped, rejected, you don't get the job you want, you experience what poverty is. All of those things, they start to humble you. Or your defense mechanism is so strong, your ego just gets so big. And so you try to rise above it by inflating. So you're likely as a defense deflate or inflate. And I don't know, young men, we tend to inflate a little bit more, I think. And so over time, I think that inflation has deflated for me. And the goal is not perfection, but coming back to reality and finding balance, just not better than or worse than, bigger or smaller. I'm not actually a perception at all of myself or a conglomerate of perceptions of, or what I perceive perceptions of other people. So you do have to eventually grow out of that self-identity that you're what the world thinks of you or what you think of yourself. That's not living in reality. So when it comes to accepting hard things and being in the moment, you know, your past is your past. It's memory that's useful to create a future. Use that information, but it's not all of who you are. And maybe who you really are is not even definable. So I think we can all have some humility of just being who we are in this moment with the feelings that we have, the awareness and the tools that we have, versus making it so much bigger and grander and obsessing over our stories. And you'll see, you know, people get obsessed with astrology, with tarot cards. They get obsessed with human design. They get obsessed with anything that's going to help them forge and define who they are in their future. So, you know, tools are fine, but there is this thing I see, this obsession with, like, this is my story, this is where I'm going, this is my journey, and it all becomes my journey, and we start to obsess over our own journey. And that also is a form maybe of spiritual bypassing and not accepting reality as it is, which is in this moment. It's another form, maybe a sexier one or a spiritual one, of bypassing the moment.
Or materialistic. Spiritual materialism.
It could be. And if you go on social media, you'll see spirituality now is very vibey. When I was growing up and I was in this space, it was not cool. My friends made fun of me. It wasn't cool.
Yeah.
Now it's cool, and it's very vibey. And it's very, look how spiritual I am. And it just makes my stomach turn when I see
You just want to vomit.
just having a hard time accepting this.
Well, it's commodified and it's turned into a booming business, and there's so much.
And self-perception, right? So if I'm seen as enlightened or spiritual, or maybe now even I'm seen as like a conscious, vulnerable man, you know, that could be cool. So whatever it is that seduces our egos, that all of a sudden that gets commoditized, and that becomes the self-image. The self-image could be that I have no self-image.
Yeah, anything. And I just don't think it happens. The maturation doesn't happen until you get, you know, the shit kicked out of your ego over time, and it humbles you regardless of what it is that you're attaching to and identifying with.
Yeah. And then we
Yeah,
need
the
the
whole.
tools to do that. Yeah, then we need the tools to be able to ground into reality. I think that's where the rubber hits the road and where the real work starts.
Yeah, do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, well, yeah, life is not as sexy as we thought it was going to be.
Oh, the
That's
disappointment.
that's a great reaction. And if it is, it tends to really F you up if you ride that wave too long, like some kind of adrenaline wave or celebrity wave or money wave or whatever it is. You know, if you ride that wave too long, it'll mess you up pretty hard. And so we do, I think, as we mature, come to realization that, like in Zen, you're chopping wood and carrying water, and life really is step by step up a 10,000 step staircase, and or 10 million steps, whatever it is, not the one your Apple Watch is telling you either, not those steps. And then we have to learn how to just deepen into the sacredness of each moment and really squeeze the juice out of it and realize time is extremely limited, and stop wasting precious mental real estate and the energy of our soul, and over refocus on what's important and master what we really came here to master, and not be so distracted. So, the average person checks their phone, I think, 144 times a day, to 10 hours a day on the screen. And we're just mostly spending our time being entertained and distracted, and not nearly enough time learning, mastering, growing, deepening, really, really enjoying the relationships that we have. And that's why I love animals. They always pull me back. They're like, there is no future, buddy. I need to poop right now, and you're going to walk me.
I mean, we're
And you're going
children.
to pick it up. You're going
Yeah.
to pick it up, Mr. Special Teacher.
Right. Totally. Totally humbling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Made me think of something. What were you just saying?
Well, so we need I think we all need a set of tools. In the past, we needed a guru, and everything was like teacher apprentice. That's a great structure, teacher apprentice. There were the time before there were books, before we traveled, one person taught another, and that was it. And now our learning is more dynamic. We've got the internet, we've got a lot of teachers, we've got peers, and we've got therapists and coaches and healers and guides. Oh my God, and Kindles,
Galore.
everything. And
Yeah.
so we're overwhelmed with information. But what you have to find is the tools that are going to help you manage what you need managed. So that might be in relationships, in intimacy, in meditation, in business, in self-reflection, all of it. And you have to find the best tools out there. Who cares where they come from, and integrate them and master yourself, master your character, master your soul. And so, for example, I'm in a men's group, and we do a lot of work around relationships and intimacy and what it means to be a man and to own a conscious, healthy, masculine energy. And that is not something I learned in India. It's not something I learned in Hawaii doing intuitive work. It's not something I learned getting a degree in philosophy, right? It all missed that part. And so that's been a really helpful component now that I'm getting the education on now that I didn't earlier. And so there's usually a gap in our education somewhere, and we have to fill those gaps. And, I have a book on finding balance called The Seven Energies of the Soul. And the point is to master every area of life and to find balance in all of them, and not just be obsessed with work or obsessed with one person in our life. And that balance, the byproduct is a general sense of well-being and joy. Maybe not happiness all the time, but almost like an existential, I'm riding this wave pretty good at the moment. And so what tools do you need to be able to do that? And for me as a meditation teacher, one of them clearly is to sit down, learn how to be quiet and reflect, process emotion, find answers, awaken that intuitive part of yourself to find your path in life and make better decisions, and be a conscious person with your energy in the world. And I can't tell you how many quote unquote conscious people I've been with who I've watched them snap, be angry, be rude, be greedy, be mean to servers, be obsessed with themselves or their money or their image. And so they're conscious for a while, and then they hit the thing they're unconscious of and they just lose it. And so we all have to look at those blind spots and, make sure that we're really growing into every area, not just the ones that are comfortable or easy or we're used to. So I try to help through my work. I try to help people do that as much as possible. And also sleep. I have a podcast just dedicated to sleep. So I spend a lot of time helping people rest.
So important.
Yeah.
So has all of seeing, so many students and kind of patterns of what people do and how people are in the world in this day and age, has it left you disillusioned? What's your feeling or your sense about it?
It's a mix. It's a contradiction. I've seen the poorest people in the world living in places like India. I have a nonprofit. We work with orphanages in Nepal. I've seen horrible things. My family, some of them did not survive the Holocaust. They died in concentration camps. And I went to MIT once and got a private tour of an incredible laboratory of inventions and technology that I didn't know existed. And I've seen very much of the spectrum of human experience, from the very unconscious, selfish, hateful energies to enlightened masters in the Himalayas and incredible science being done, and wealth and poverty. I've definitely experienced the spectrum. I am a positive person. At heart, I'm a Trekkie. So my optimal future is one where, kind of like Star Trek, where humanity eventually expands beyond our planet, and there's no finite resources anymore. We find a way to have infinite resources and maybe extend our lives. And then we, instead of working just to get resources to survive, we decide what our real purpose is. Maybe it's exploration, creativity, deepening into love, and refocus that way. And so my hope for humanity is we cross that bridge and eventually get there. I know it doesn't look positive, but the news only reports what's negative, 90% of the time. And so I think there's a deep bias that we're stuck or going backwards. And the reality, I think, is more complex. And if you just look at the bigger leaps we've made in the last 200, 300 years, if you just look back, at the human experience, we have made some massive leaps. We've more than doubled our lifespans, and we could double, quadruple them again. Who knows? We've only gone to the moon, and eventually humans could go beyond. And so I'm quite hopeful that we've only had a handful of enlightened masters. And I'm also hopeful that there may be many, many, many enlightened beings eventually awakening on the planet, and that tide will shift too. So I am definitely positive. Whether humanity survives this growth phase, I don't have an answer for that. I gave it a 60-40. We make it.
As a whole?
As a whole, as a species.
Wow. So you're a Trekkie, or is it Trekkie?
A Trekkie, a Star Trek guy.
Yes. You're a Trekkie, you're an optimist, but you're also giving it 60.
Yeah, maybe even a little bit better odds than that. I could be pushed to 70-30.
Okay. What would that take?
Well, not to say there won't be a World War III or horrible things that happen in the next century, but if you look at the bigger picture, within hundreds of years or thousands of years, if we can survive, I think we will really take some massive evolutionary steps in our technology and our consciousness and the way we treat each other. And then, and if you look at a small slice of time, it always looks pretty pessimistic. But if you look at the very large scale, I mean, because look, at World War II just happened. I mean, my grandfather, grandmother, they went through it. They're alive. My other grandfather who died was born in 1914 and fought in World War II. So that just happened in the scale of things. This last pandemic, the first one, World War I, go back to the Inquisition and the plague, and it all just kind of happened quite recently. And so when we step back, and we look at the bigger picture, we're doing pretty good. I don't have any other species to compare it to. I know we are quickly destroying the planet. And so I think the collective environmental catastrophe that we're facing just doesn't care about borders of countries, right? We all breathe the same air and drink the same water and have the same soil. And so eventually I think the push will be for us to come together to save the planet. And that might be the biggest inflection point that together we've ever seen, which is whether it's a meteor or some environmental catastrophe. I think that's very likely to be the thing that either breaks us or brings us together as a species. And so the more conscious and compassionate we are, the more likely we're going to get through it.
Mm-hmm. What gives you hope, or what makes you happy these days?
All of my actual interpersonal relationships give me incredible hope. People always complain about the news, and I do as well. But on the day-to-day basis, how much of that are you actually experiencing versus how much positivity and love are you actually experiencing, right? So when you ask people how their personal life is and the relationships they have, it's always better than what you see on the news. It's almost always better. If you just, obviously we live in America, and so in a safer place, but I have traveled a lot. And even when you go to a place that has a lot of poverty and you meet people that you consider poor, they're so rich in their relationships and in love and their appreciation for life. And so it's a very different picture than that's painted in the media. If I was to hook you up to an IV and just inject you with the 10 worst things that happened every day to 7-8 billion people, you would be horrified. But if instead I injected you with the billions of beautiful moments that happen every day to the vast majority of humanity, you'd be pretty positive. And so we're just getting the wrong influx of mental energy, and almost like a mental pollution. There's a lot of mental pollution.
Yeah. It's reminding me of during the pandemic, I think it was like Ryan Reynolds or somebody that created the Good News Network. And it was just so uplifting. And it was like local people, just like people like us in our neighborhoods, like sending in cool things that like we're doing in our lives. That I do think that is something that maybe we just are not in touch with because of this. There's such a bias towards the negative and what we ingest as far as media and everything. And yes, there's horrible wars and catastrophes going on. And we're probably missing a lot by not feeding our minds with what's going on in, those positive interactions.
And also, if you look at it from an energetic point of view, there's our personal emotions and energies that we're working on, and then there's ones in our communities, ones in our countries, and global ones. So an entire country could be moving through a phase of working through a level of fear or a certain identity crisis or a moral or ethical quandary that the nation is in. And so we've got our individual, and then we also have our collective energies that we're working on. And it always ends up coming down to like the simplicity of, is like fear and tribalism going to win, or is compassion and love and awakening consciousness? And so you get to decide what you're going to feed, what energy you're going to feed, and how you're going to play your part. And if you're going to be the cynical, despondent, apathetic, avoidant, it's all burning, why even bother? I can give you so many reasons why, then it's highly likely you're doing that to your personal life too. And all you're doing is reinforcing the negativity that you're trapped in versus the reality of life. I've seen that happen a lot. Most internet trolls are the definition of that.
Should they all see a therapist?
If you're an internet troll, you should definitely see a therapist. If you're spending your time anonymously going after other people and criticizing them without knowing them or having compassion, you should see a therapist.
I think most people benefit from therapy.
It's, you tell me, but I've seen it could be a double-edged sword too, where you can get into decades of telling the same story over and over, and that story just being validated. I don't think a good therapist would do that. But I have seen that happen.
Yeah.
For sure. Where someone comes to me with a story they've been telling their therapist for 20 years. And then we find out that might not actually even be true.
Yeah, I think it depends. It always depends. I think you can show up in meditation spaces and be avoiding
Yes.
decades of grief. And, it really just depends on who it is, the moment, what the person's capable of, what the therapist is aware of, all of these things. So my goal in helping people is to, overcome through a slow, gradual process, first becoming aware of where am I, what is the repetition actually? I'm telling you the same story, and I'm going to let them tell me the story. They're going to tell it differently a little bit each time. And my role is to ask curious questions and, open that person's mind, hopefully, to new possibilities, new awarenesses. And through that awareness and kind of like that softening, because I think that therapy should not be a judgmental place. It's like a co-created space of exploration. And so through that process, it gets slowed down. And then I think people become more aware of choice, and they get to make a different choice. And that just takes time.
You're kind of like a midwife to healing.
Okay. Say more. What do you mean?
You're the guy, you're guiding them to their own healing, right? You're there to reflect, to help them reflect, and to help them cultivate awareness towards things they have blind spots around or are unconscious to. Sometimes a powerful question can help someone go, oh, I didn't even think about it that way or look at it that way. And I think you tell me too, but the most fulfilling thing as a teacher or guide is to watch somebody get their own answer and realization while you're sitting there with them and you help them come to it.
My heart explodes. I'm so happy when people find their own answers. That's not my job.
Yeah.
And it's just so rewarding and gratifying. And there's like this shitty part of being a therapist or being in the healing space, being a meditation teacher, because you're with human suffering all the time. All the time. Let's repeat. All the time.
Yeah. And that was the path of the Buddha, right? Was I want to awaken out of suffering, and then I want to help other people awaken out of suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also some element of, you mentioned like people can be enabled, I think, as well in their suffering. And that also takes skill to work with. And so I think there's also an element of challenge that can come with skillful means of helping someone overcome suffering or a repetition. So I definitely utilize that, and when the moment is right, because someone might not be ready to hear something. So that takes discernment as a therapist or a guide or a teacher.
What are some of the tools that you use in therapy or in transpersonal psychology to help somebody, become aware of something they're suffering through or stuck on?
So a challenge might be, so I study modern psychoanalysis, and that's kind of, there's nitty gritty. So you observe patterns over time, and you sort of join with them actually in their resistance. So they feel that you kind of are them. You believe it fully because you take on their experience, and then you can say something that might shock the system that is actually, it's called ego dystonic. And so it's waking somebody up to a different possibility, or maybe seeing what they're doing in a different light. It can sound jarring, and if it's too early, it could sound mocking or patronizing, but it's basically like skillful means of waking somebody up to the suffering that they're already causing in their own life, and having them contemplate, well, maybe I am doing that, or I don't like that, but I didn't like hearing that. What's that about?
Well, I'm going to satirize that for a moment. So you kind of become them and then you make fun of them sitting shoulder to shoulder. I love this. This is my comedy brain is going to explode over this.
You could do a whole stand-up routine.
Hey, I'm you. Oh, look at me. Look at poor me. Look at me ruining my relationships. Look at poor me.
That's not
I'm,
the sound of it, but we can differentiate. That's your stand-up routine. I think it could also come from there's not a mocking element to it. Like I had an experience where, I have plenty of experiences where I'm trying to learn something new, or I feel deeply stuck and resistant to growth. Like, for instance, I felt terrified of going back to graduate school for becoming a therapist. I was like, I can't do that. Like, I'm way too messed up. I am not mature enough. Absolutely not. And then, like, on top of that, it was like the holy grail in my mind was going to Naropa for the contemplative psychotherapy program, because I knew the level of rigor that program trains therapists in. You sit with your mind. It is a meditation program. You're essentially on a retreat for 3 years with a cohort, and it's just like a pressure cooker. And I did not trust myself in that moment that I could handle that. I'm like, I am terrified. Like, I can't do that. Like, little old me. And I actually had a therapist who held the possibility of like, you may not see it, but yes, you can. So it could be a more like encouraging, sort of supportive or scaffolding thing that you may not fully trust or believe in yourself that you can do something, but that was my experience of being challenged in that moment to step into something that I was very scared of and that felt very uncertain.
yeah, that's great. And there should be a level of fear you have to go through, right? It's a kind of an initiation of walking through that portal into the next phase of life and being in some form, some ego death of, all right,
Absolutely.
I might fail.
Yeah. Or any like life or milestone or big life change, getting married. What a fucking existential crisis that was for me.
Yeah.
Any type of major decision, I think, comes with a lot of questions about, well, yeah. Actually, I'm curious what your thoughts are about that. Like those
Hmm.
big moments and making decisions and
Yeah. I think most people live in a maybe kind of gray zone of this isn't yes, it's not no, it's all right. And you'll even look around the walls in their apartment or house are gray. The way they approach ordering a coffee is gray. The way they spend their money, the way they decide on a partner, everything is a compromise and a maybe. That in and of itself is a slow death. And so when it comes to those big decisions like marriage, career choice, whatever it is, I don't think you want to live in the maybe. This is the inflection point where people get stuck. They're like, well, it's not a total yes, so then it's a no. I disagree with that. You might have to grow into the yes by working through suffering, working through pain and resistance.
yeah.
Most people, when they hear this, they go, if it's not a yes, it's a no. That's immature. You're not grown up yet So it's not a yes. You're growing into it. Do you want to grow into it? And if it's a partnership, do you want to grow into it with this person, even though it's going to be hard? And I see a lot of people with this kind of Peter Pan syndrome of never growing up and bouncing from one relationship to another, from one thing they enjoy to another. I don't like this. They say my intuition says this isn't for me. It's not my truth. But really what it is their resistance to experiencing pain and growth.
Or vulnerability.
So I want to differentiate the maybe versus the growing into the yes.
Yeah.
You don't have to be growing. A lot of people are not growing. They're just living in a maybe gray. That's different than going, all right, I want to be a yes. I got to get there by moving through pain, moving through energy. Or you move through it and you go, this is a clear no.
Right.
I dislike it. But the lack of clarity is where you have to work on the energy. If there's a lack of clarity, if there's doubt, confusion, uncertainty, fear, that's where the work is. And finding the clarity is the spiritual path. I think it's a very, very big part of the path in and of itself. And then maybe you grow into a person who has a lot of clarity. So wouldn't it be nice if someone was like, you are a person that is present and has clarity? Wow. Could you let that wave of compliment wash over you? And so if you're not that person, let's start to find the tools and ways to get you there. And one of the doorways is through learning to accept hard things. If I can accept the hard things and be present, then everything else is easy in comparison.
Yeah, it's reminding me of nope, I just froze. Okay, back to it. David, I really like what you're saying here. Okay, so you're saying that accepting hard things leads you or helps you grow from this state of stuckness, which you're saying is a maybe, into clarity, which then becomes a yes or a no.
Exactly. So, for example, something difficult happens and you ruminate and you resist and you fight and you avoid. All of that is forms of resistance and pain. So it's not the thing that happened necessarily that's the important part to accept. We'll get there. It's you, your energy, and your reaction. And so if we start with those layers and work through them individually, then we'll end up in reality. This is the reality of the moment without me fighting it. So all of the fighting is some form of pain manifesting in your mind and in your body, in your emotional body. So for example, let's say somebody gets rejected and dumped, or they lose a job and they feel a wave of rejection. I hate this. I hate this feeling. I don't like it. I don't want it. F them. They did it. You build a story, you build a case, you get lost in remorse. It's not the thing that happened nearly as much as it is your reaction. So then we have to unpack one layer at a time. All right, I feel enormous rejection. Again, you think that's a problem? No. The problem is the resistance to the rejection. So that's giving oxygen to the rejection. So I hate rejection. I don't like feeling rejection. F you, I'm going to reject you, rejection.
Yeah.
That's a fun dance to get into, rejecting rejection. And so if we sit still and we're meditating on rejection, and instead of fighting it and hating it and avoiding it and building stories around why the other person's an idiot, what if we just let rejection wash over us? Feel the pain fully without a story, just be really, really present with it in our bodies, and just that maybe there's a sorrow there or a loss. And then it will play out. It will eventually exhaust itself, especially in the light of our awareness and compassion.
Yes.
And with letting the story fall away. And now we're in reality. And rejection looks like a 10-foot monster, and it's actually like a little baby. It's a cute little baby. You just hold it and you pet it. You're so cute. And it's not nearly as big of a deal as it was like the shadow on the wall that you thought a huge monster was coming, and it was just the shadow. And then you learn a great lesson about self-acceptance. And maybe the whole journey was about self-acceptance, about accepting who you are and where you are, and whether a company or job or a person didn't want you for a specific role or moment, that doesn't define who you are. That is clarity. And then I think the doors open for other opportunities. But if you're stuck in that resistance to rejection, there's no space for anything else to come in and validate you or love you. And I've definitely worked through a fair amount of rejection in life. That's definitely been one of the wounds that I've had to learn from the most and grow through. It is an incredible rejection. This is all just one example, but it can be an amazing teacher. Loss can be another amazing teacher. And so your teacher is always right in front of you. It's the thing you want to avoid and fight, and the thing you hate and that just haunts you every night and morning. That's your teacher showing up, and you're telling it, get away from me. And the path to accepting hard things is inviting it in, letting it wash over you. And the paradox is the more you accept things the way they are, the more likely they're going to change.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. It makes me think about compassion
Yes.
as one of the necessary components of how we work with suffering, and how this whole thing runs and smooths things out, or is kind of like not a magic thing, but it's I don't know how to describe it actually, but I'm like feeling it. Like it lives in all of us, you know. It's like that is like kind of the nature of who we are, I think, at the base of our human experience. And so tapping into that sense of compassion and self-compassion really is powerful to help us accept hard things, accept ourselves, and it just softens it.
It's like, yeah, it's like when the light of the sun, you go outside in the morning and it hits your skin. Not only is there a light that illuminates, but there's a warmness and
Yes.
kind of and an acceptance. So I think compassion and acceptance are two sides of the same coin. Yeah.
Wow. We're getting somewhere.
That's how I like to approach any
Yeah.
difficult energy.
Yeah. Say more about how you do that, since that's such a critical component. And I love that analogy of feeling the warmth on your skin. Like that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Compassion is inherent in us, but it can be very much buried. And maybe you're somebody that has compassion for other people more easily than for yourself, which is a lot of people. And so when you sit still and some difficult energy arises, some ruminating sequence of thoughts that keep coming back that haunt you, some old pain that you can't heal, again, it's the resistance towards it that feeds it and fuels it. And so can you have compassion towards the resistance? The
Yes.
resistance is probably trying to protect you.
Yes.
And so even seeing the resistance as negative becomes a problem. So can you sit and have compassion for the resistance itself and realize it's just a response or a reaction that you're having towards something that hurts, and just be with it, and it'll slowly melt away. And people will be like, well, I sat with it. It didn't go away. How long did you sit? 5 minutes. Okay, well, it might take hundreds of hours
Yeah.
of sitting still, of sitting with it over and over. And there might be dozens of layers to one energy. And if you haven't gotten through it, you haven't gotten through it. Again, that's the reality. If it's still here, it's still here. But is it at 70% or 50% or 30? Are we making progress, or is it totally stuck? And if you're totally stuck, if we got a capital T, totally, man, stuck, then can you sit with totally stuck and the pain of that and the resistance to totally stuck, and even let 1% of the stuckness melt off by not being in resistance to being stuck? So no matter where you are, even if I'm the biggest loser on earth, totally stuck, never going anywhere, well, can you sit with that and let a little bit of that start to melt, that belief, that energy? So you can only start with where you are, not where you want to be. And your body doesn't lie, energy doesn't lie, only your mind lies. So sit with the energy. So that's how I like to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely layers. And when I've developed, or when I'm more intentional about having a self-compassion practice, which sometimes looks like just literally the mantra, I love myself, like silently going in the background, it shifts my relationship to my resistance and the pain. It's kind of amazing, actually, that harshness, I think, like the judgment, the critical part of us that is judging, our experience. And through that practice of I love myself, it creates enough space to reorient to that part that I start to see like, oh my gosh, like that makes me sad. There's like a sadness and a softness to that compassion when I actually see what I'm doing to myself. And that is something that really helps. And then moving into even forgiveness, that's like not a word that I use a lot, but kind of was recently reintroduced to. And that's just so helpful. I should practice that more.
Yeah. And forgiveness is a form of compassion.
Right.
Yeah. It's compassion in action in a way. It could be externalized or internalized. And to forgive yourself is a form of acceptance, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a form of compassionate acceptance. I was unconscious. I made a mistake. I did it out of fear, out of confusion. And it's maybe the word we could bring to it is it's understandable based on the circumstances in the moment. Everything I did in my past, I look back, I'm like, you unconscious. Oh my gosh, I can't believe at 22 I did that. I said that. That comes up. We have I'm a knucklehead moment, and then we have compassion and let that wave pass too, and realize we are maturing at the rate we're maturing at, and we can have acceptance towards the rate that we are maturing at. Who are we to decide what's fast, slow, or otherwise? That's all just added on judgment, added on top. And all you could do is work from where you are right now. And if you let the remorse of the past or regret of the past just weigh you down, then you're really just punishing yourself, and it's not helping you or anybody else. And I think a lot of religions, unfortunately, they fuel off of guilt and shame and sin and paralyze you on purpose into that so they can control you. And nothing makes my skin crawl more than anything that tries to identify you based on your past and get you stuck in negative feelings about who you're supposed to think you are.
Right. So that's like a creepy feeling for you, or?
Any organized institution that has unmoving beliefs that thinks everyone else should also believe them and makes people feel shame or guilt makes my skin crawl.
Yeah. It's a source of a lot of negative things in the world, for sure.
Yeah, and it can go the other way, which is I am a pious person. I'm a godly person. I'm a person of God who's pious. And
Yeah.
it's like, you are repressed creep is what you
Oh,
are.
yeah. Well, and just the hypocrisy around that sort of ego structure belief.
Yeah, nothing gets suppressed forever, right? And so you're not a good person all the time. So that's also
No.
a story.
Right.
I remember I was in India, and some folks invited me to dinner at their house, and it was like 12 of them. I was like, oh, what is this group? And it turned out to be Christian missionaries in India trying to convert the Hindu people there to Christianity. And I remember like the main guy, I don't know if he was a priest or what he was, but he had a younger wife. I was in my 20s, and she was just talking to me. We're just having a conversation about life. There's nothing weird at all. And I could just see him glancing over in envy and an insecurity. He's talking to my wife. It was so palpable. And I was like, oh, you're such a godly, pious dude until all your insecurities arise.
Right.
I thought that was so fascinating. Anyway, I digress.
Lots of lessons as a young man in India.
Yes, there were a
All
lot of.
types of life, different forms of.
I'll be mining my own memories for those lessons for a long time. And I'm actually going back to India in September. I'm taking a group to the Himalayas. So let's see what more lessons are there. Hopefully, well, let's see what it's there. Yeah.
Anything before we wrap up? Anything you want to share, or anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I always say, I love this quote from Pema Chodron, that nothing goes away until it teaches us what we need to know. And the path to accepting hard things, that is the path. That is the path. And even the feeling or thought, I can't accept this hard thing. Can you accept the feeling and the thought that you can't accept the hard thing? Well, even we're not even getting to the thing. That's where I would start for most people. That's where I would be. I can't stop these ruminating thoughts. Can you accept that you can't stop the ruminating thoughts and even accept them?
And bring a loving,
Yes.
compassionate mindset towards that.
They might have the greatest message of your life and they're waking you up every day and you're just pushing them away. Yeah.
And I love that we also have each other and we're all connected in the same way that we all do this. This is like what we do as humans. So I think there's a sense of relief and compassion in that as well for myself of like normalizing like, oh shit, I'm not the only one doing this. And that takes the isolation and the shame out of it as well for me. So
Yeah. And you were not born in sin. That happened
right.
in college.
That's another podcast.
The college years.
The college years, maybe we'll revisit the mistakes and the wisdom gained.
Woo!
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And it was a pleasure speaking with you as always.
Thank you. It's so good to see you, Kristina.
Okay.
Great chat.
Thanks, you too. Bye. Thanks for listening to Say More, a podcast about the kinds of conversations that invite us to go deeper. A mentor once told me that the goal of therapy is to say everything. So my encouragement to you is to stay brave, be curious, and say more. Until next time.